Sephiroth, I mean Gerald, I mean Kakarot. Anyway, whatever name you decide to go by, Calcharo is one of the strongest 5-star DPS at the time of making this guide. Calcharo has one of, if not the highest possible damage output in the game, but he is also deceptively hard to play to reach his full potential, requiring full focus on swap cancelling every single death messenger. But even without doing so, Calcharo does send some death messages to his foes, so let's cover his skills, his best weapons, echoes and his best echo sets, his best teams, his sequence notes and how to play him correctly. Let's go! Calcharo's basic attacks are unfortunately basically never used, as you do want to spend most of your time inside your ultimate. And even though not only the tutorial but also some content creators do advertise for a basic skill, basic skill, basic skill, basic sequence outside his ultimate stance, that is less efficient than just spamming the skill 3 times. Speaking of which, his skill Extermination Order is technically on a 10-second cooldown and can be recast up to 3 times. However, the skill already enters its cooldown after the first cast, which means, as shown in the background right now, with enough spacing between his skill casts you could have a theoretical permanent uptime. Unfortunately, this game is very swap heavy and you will basically never get to see or use this, but I thought it is still worth mentioning for those people who actually play for fun instead of his best in slot rotations and meta. Each skill cast generates 4 Concerto and 3 to 7.9 energy depending on whether it is the first, second or third skill cast. Before we can get to his ultimate, let's talk about his forte. Hitting an enemy with his resonance skill generates 1 cruelty and he can hold up to 3. Casting his heavy attack when he has 3 cruelty will have him perform heavy attack mercy instead, which will recover additional Concerto and ultimate energy. While in his Resonance Liberation state Deathblade Gear, his cruelty resource is replaced by Killing Intent. Every basic attack recovers 1 Killing Intent up to 5, and at 5 Killing Intent his next basic attack is replaced by Death Messenger. This is the main source of his damage, and it is extremely important to note that dodge counters do not, I repeat, do not generate any Killing Intent for him. His Deathblade gear window is very tight and, as seen later in the rotation section of this video, missing even 1 Death Messenger, for example due to dodging or getting staggered, will lower his DPS significantly. That being said, let's talk about his ultimate. His Resonance Liberation costs 125 energy, generates 20 Concerto and is on a 20-second cooldown, deals some damage when cast and sets Calcharo into the Deathblade gear state. While in this state, all his basic attacks are transformed into Hound's Roar, which still deal basic attack damage, and he now does have access to the Killing Intent mechanic. And hence also the Death Messenger part of his forte. Death Messenger deals Resonant Liberation damage and makes up around 50% of all his damage dealt. Having a quick look at his intro, it deals damage and generates some Concerto. If Calcharo is in his Deathblade gear state, the intro skill Wanted Outlaw is replaced by Necessary Means, which does honestly basically the same, but it does more damage now. His outro leaves behind a Phantom, which deals quite some significant damage. For his inherent skill Bloodshed Awaken, when casting Heavy Attack Mercy, his Resonance Liberation damage bonus is increased by 10%, and Revenant Rush reduces his damage taken by 15% when Death Messenger hits a target. His traces grant him attack percent and crit damage, which makes crit rate on him even more valuable. As we already touched on before, most of his damage comes from his Death Messenger and Ultimate, which means our final skill priority is Forte and Ultimate into skill, into basic attacks and intro. For his set, a 5-piece Void Thunder is his best in slot, but mix-matching Void Thunder, Lingering Tunes or even just a 5-piece Lingering Tunes will only cost you around 11% damage. Regardless of which set you take, Flautist is his best in slot echo skill, as it can not only be easily swap cancelled and deals quite some good damage, but it also generates 10 Concerto, which is pretty freaking good. Including Flautist, that makes Calcharo a Concerto generation machine and allows him to trigger his outro and other party members' intro hence quite often, which if played correctly will increase his damage even beyond my calculations. This also means you will play a 3-4-3-1-1 setup for Calcharo instead of the usual 4-3-3-1-1. For his main stats, going for crit rate is his best choice even with the crit rate weapon, with crit damage being just slightly behind or even if you have a lot of crit rate substat rolls. For his 3-cost echoes, which does include the floatist if you remember, going for double electro damage percent is his best onslaught, but mix-matching attack percent and electro percent or double attack percent even will only cost you between 5 to 9% damage. For much smoother ultimate uptime and less sweating, you could also take an ER percent main stat, but I would highly discourage it as you will lose out on quite a bit of damage, which is honestly not worth the trade-off. It is way better to get this energy regeneration on your substats instead, and you will need around 5 to 20% energy regeneration in total, depending on your player skill and team. This means 1 to 3 substat rolls in ER do satisfy that and you can focus on damage right afterwards. ER until around 5 to 20%, into crit values, into attack percent, into flat attack, liberation damage and basic attack damage are the most useful substats you are looking for. For his weapons, his best onslaught is Jian's signature Verdant Summoned. However, it is only 5% ahead of the standard 5-star Lustrous Razor. Right behind we have the rank 5s of Autumn Trace and Helios Cleaver, as well as the rank 1s. An R5 Broadblade of Night is surprisingly fine as well, at least better than Dauntless Evernight and Discord. Speaking of Discord, this is the perfect segue to let you know that we do have indeed a Discord server you can also join. You will find the link in the description. Everything together, these are the final endgame stat goals I personally would recommend. Before we can talk about his rotation, let's have a quick look at their sequences. As with all standard characters, their sequences are not the greatest and you can expect a damage increase of around 32% going from S0 to S6, and nearly all of that damage gain is allocated in his S3, S4 and S6. However, we can not just look at damage to evaluate how good a sequence is, and his S1 is probably his best sequence, well, outside of pure damage gain, allowing you to generate an extra 10 resonance energy every rotation, which lowers his total energy gain by around 10%, making him able to be played with no or at least close to no ER. That said, let's cover his main rotation. We start off with the intro skill into a single cast of his skill to start stacking the 5-piece Void Thunder effect. Next up is his ultimate, which will grant immediately 5 stacks of Killing Intent, which means we can directly cast his Death Messenger into 5 basics, into another Death Messenger, into another 5 basics, and a last Death Messenger right before we cast his Echo and swap cancel it out into his outro. While this looks like a lot of different buttons to press, we really only left click during his ultimate and his Death Messenger is being auto-casted as well as his basic attack is being replaced by it. However, this is the rotation we use to calculate his average damage. This does not actually reflect the damage he is able to dish out. As we can see, the cast of each Death Messenger is around 2 seconds, which is very long, and we will also generate a lot of Concerto doing so. This means we are technically able to proc his outro twice during this rotation as well. So let's take a hypothetical example rotation for all the really sweaty gamers out here. Intro, into skill, into ultimate, into Death Messenger, swap cancel immediately to Yanlin, cast Yanlin E into basic, swap back to Calcharo, dash cancel his basics 5 times, Death Messenger yet into another swap cancel into Yanlin, into 2 basics from her back to Calcharo, repeat 5 dash cancel by 6 into the last Death Messenger, swap cancel it yet again for a 3rd time, back to Yanlin into her 2nd E, switch back to Calcharo Echo and outro into Yanlin. And all of that while you also have to dodge. There is a lovely Bilibili video about it, which I will link in the description. Basically, you are playing 2 characters at once. However, if done well, Calcharo can easily exceed every DPS on my charts and become an absolute monster. However, as this is not realistic for most gamers out there who are actually watching this guide, while I do want to mention it, it is likely not highly applicable to most of you, and neither it is for me. I am just too old for that. Outside his ultimate, we can expect to switch him in once and cast his skill 1, 2 or maybe even 3 times and his heavy attack Mercy for an additional energy and Concerto generation as well of making use of his passive. That being said, let's look at the teams. Unfortunately, Calcharo's best team is not available yet. However, when Yunlin does become available, pairing Yunlin and Verena with him will grant the highest possible damage you can expect, with nearly doubling his damage and surpassing even Jian. However, again, given how hard he is to play, you can and should actually expect less damage than shown here. I just want to reiterate that dodging and switch cancelling his Death Messenger is extremely important in the Tower of Adversity especially, and you will get absolutely toasted if you don't. Anyway, aside from Yunlin, his current best teammates are Mortefi and Jianxing. While Mortefi's Ultra buff is not very useful for Calcharo himself, he just provides some really good off-field damage, which makes up for the non-gate buffs. He also works really well with Jianxing's heavy attack damage. Jianxing itself provides 38% Resonance Liberation damage deepen and grants him an overall DPS increase of around 38%. Many people do advise Sanhua as an option, however, as only 27% of his total damage profile is basic attack damage, we can also only increase the DPS by around 27%. This is, to be honest, pretty cope, and I would not recommend Sanhua as a good hybrid option for our Sephiroth clone. However, if you do really like her, please feel free to play her. Fun is the most important aspect after all. Aside from those units, Baiji is another healing option, albeit much harder to play and also much harder to integrate into any team rotation, at least more than Verena, that is. That being said, thank you so much for watching, don't forget to like and subscribe, leave a comment on what your thoughts about Calcharo are, and I do wish you a pleasant day. Peace.